Good evening. They found me under a bridge. That's what I told them I was going to tell you. Now, I'm an artist, and I'm married to John Hogan, a drummer. We're a very, very creative household. Our little 6-year-old girl, Ellie, doesn't have a chance. Either that or she's going to grow up to be an accountant and totally not get us at all. So it's one or the other. But really, really privileged to be here tonight. Just met Kim for the first time tonight. That's how much research she did on me, see? No, we've been Facebook friends. And you know, Facebook friendship is not real. Everyone knows that, right? Not real. We actually touched and hugged for the first time tonight. So I highly recommend that above Facebook friendship. But anyway, God has his ways of connecting people, does he not? And I'll take it if technology is the way for me to get to meet Kim Honeycutt and be introduced to all that you guys do here. Really privileged to be here. Thank you for the invite. I can remember it like it was yesterday. It's funny how when trauma hits, it opens you up so wide that you remember every single little detail. I remember the color of the room. I remember the antiseptic smell it had. I remember the cold steel table I was sitting on, and it was lined with paper that crackled every time I moved. I remember the look on my doctor and nurse's face as I tried to explain to them why, as a virgin bride with only one partner, I was there to be tested for every STD on the planet. And I stumbled and I stammered and tried to find my words, and it was quite awkward. But finally, I found the way to tell them that I was involuntarily using 3 different forms of birth control at the same time. And that knowing look crossed my doctor's face, and he stopped me mid-sentence. And he came up and he hugged me. And his hug felt like the very arms of God wrapping himself around me. And he whispered into my ear that it was going to be all right. And I believed him that it was going to be all right. For some reason, I felt like God himself was talking to me through the doctor. I could see my father's look in his eyes, and I could hear the sound of Daddy's voice saying it's going to be all right. But all right meant that I would lose my marriage, my stepson, my extended family. All right meant that over a course of a few short weeks, I would lose my job, my car, my home, my money, everything. Every comfort that ensured that I was doing all right. Every title that helped to define me, every connection that gave my life value and meaning. I felt as though I were floating around in some weird orbit, completely untethered to the earth, no longer a participant in my own life, but having been rendered invisible and powerless. All right meant that what I'd waited 34 years for would be over in 2.5. But what does a good Christian girl do with something like that? How could this happen to me? I was a good girl, and I was doing good things, and I was trying to live a good life, and things were supposed to be good. But things weren't good. 2 + 2 was supposed to equal 4, right? But this was very, very bad math. Bad math is trying to do the smart thing and waiting until I was 34 to get married instead of getting married right out of college like all of my friends were, and I was trying to be smart, only to find out that the man that I finally did say yes to wasn't who he pretended to be at all. Bad math is having a man stand in front of me with an engagement ring and hearing that first voice say, no, it's way too fast. But then hearing the other voice in rebuttal say, you mean to tell me that at your age, you've got a man standing here proposing to you and you're even thinking of saying no? and then listening to the second voice. Bad math is saving myself from a marriage. And I don't say that lightly because, come on, I'm a passionate, creative gal. It was really hard. That was hard work. But I believed in honoring God with my body. I believed in the idea of purity, only to find myself bound to someone whose entire life was consumed by the pursuit of illicit encounters of every kind. He sought me out because he believed that the good in me would drive out the bad in him. Bad math is vowing to love, honor, and protect until death do you part, and then realizing that should I stay, my death would very surely come from the one to whom I made those vows. Bad math is loving God and wanting to have a marriage with him as the anchor, and finding myself adrift on a turbulent sea of deceit and secret lives and betrayal. I remember the crushing shame. I was smarter than that. I was stronger than that. My counselor, and oh yes, there were many years of counseling, said that I had simply stepped into someone else's lifelong pattern of destruction and chaos. It was quite chaotic. But for me, it felt more like being a surprise guest on a really, really bad Jerry Springer show. That's about how it played out. The days of waiting for those test results was agonizing. But as I surrendered to the humility of it all, an odd thing started to happen. No, it wouldn't be a disease or a baby that was growing inside of me. It was gratitude. I became deeply thankful that I hadn't gotten pregnant, that I wouldn't be forced to co-parent with that man. I was thankful to be free from any diseases that could have claimed my life or been an ongoing health concern. I was thankful that he hadn't been physically or sexually abusive, considering the degenerate nature of his involvements. And I consider myself fortunate to have experienced only his disinterest and detachment once the thrill of the conquest was gone. In place of the devastating loss came a new awareness of the wonderful things I did have in my life. A new church family with loving friends who supported and encouraged me against my will at times. A friend who dragged me out of the house and forced me to take walks in the woods, breathe some fresh air, and take in a movie. A coworker who offered me a safe place to stay during my recovery. Anonymous notes of encouragement tucked into my Bible or into my mailbox. Bags of groceries that would show up on my doorstep. Next door neighbors' kids who would attack me in the driveway and give me hugs and kisses. You see, it became the simple things, the thoughtful things that made me feel like the arms of God were wrapped around me, telling me it was all going to be all right. I was sheltered and loved and not forgotten or invisible. This would not be my undoing. In truth, it was only 2.5 years. 2.5 years, that's just a blip on the screen. But the trauma that I suffered in those short years was so profound, it was like a bomb had gone off in my heart. You see, what I learned the hard way is that life is never just a tidy math equation, like 2 + 2 = 4. It's complicated and illogical and messy. And for some of us, it's war zone messy, like Twin Towers messy. The devastation can hit without warning, and we find ourselves rifling through the rubble of what was once our life in a dazed stupor, wondering how on earth could this happen to us? But sometimes God uses the darkness to define our light. Sometimes he exposes our brokenness as an invitation to healing. Sometimes he asks us to walk through the valley of the shadow of death in order to find new life. Sometimes bad things happen to good people, and it has nothing to do with whether they deserve it or not. Because sometimes God's most precious gifts are wrapped in pain. What I realized in that aftermath was that God was willing to let me be broken so that he could get to the parts of me that I hadn't surrendered yet. He wanted all of me, not just the things I was going to give up easily, the stuff I held on to with white knuckles, my sacred cows. He let my good things fall apart so his better things could fall into place. What I thought was my ultimate ruin became the necessary course correction in my life. It led me to new levels of healing and freedom, to the love of my life, John, who's given me the love and acceptance that is truer than anything I ever had the courage to believe was possible. You see, in the end, it's not really about the gory details of how badly I've been bruised in life, or the horrific things that have been done to me, or the bad choices that I've even made. What's important is my response to the presence of those things in my life. Will I let them make me bitter or better? Will I allow the breaking to open up new parts of me, or will I self-protect by closing myself off? Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's easy. It's the hardest work I've ever done. This getting healthy inside and out, figuring out how to find the strength in my many weaknesses, owning up to the fact that I do not have it all together. Those were tough words to learn how to say. And that God is the only one that is truly good. And then there's trusting in his always good plans for my life, and well, let's just say I'm still a work in progress. As a single young woman, I'd always loved this scripture in Hosea 2. But the tragedy I experienced brought deeper understanding. Has that happened to anyone else? You know scripture all your life, and then all of a sudden, bam, you understand it on a whole different level. Let me read it to you. Hosea 2, therefore, I'm now going to allure her. I will lead her into the wilderness and speak tenderly to her. Isn't that odd? He would drive you in or lead you into the wilderness to speak tenderly to you. I don't think of the wilderness as a very tender place. There I will give her back her vineyards. In the desert? Really? And I will make the valley of Achor a door of hope. I love to do word studies. I looked up the word Achor. Do you know it means trouble? I'll make the valley of trouble a door of hope. In that day, declares the Lord, you will call me my husband and no longer call me my master. I will betroth you to me forever. I will betroth you in righteousness and justice, in love and compassion and faithfulness, and you will acknowledge the Lord. So let this be my redemption story. My always good God made the valley of trouble a door of hope for me. And in the depths of that shadowed valley was born a light bearer whose greatest desire is to go into the hard places and do the hard things and take light into the darkness and speak truth into the lie. What the enemy intended to be the end, what I thought was the end of my hopes and dreams, was the beginning of all my tomorrows. Thank you.